Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. I am Luke Lipinski.
And I'm Doug Cannon.
On this week's show, we break down the first blockbuster trade of the season and try not to get suspended.
We'll also give you our weekly updates on the Flyers' struggles and the point tally for Nail Yakupov.
All that and more. Let's drop the puck on episode 22. Episode 22 is finally here. Finally. Doug, I'm Luke.
You make it sound like it's been so long.
In case you haven't met me before, now I've introduced myself.
Hi, Luke.
How you doing, Doug? Who's the most famous number 22 in the NHL?
Ooh, that's a funky number.
Mike Bossy?
Ooh, there's a good.
I'm going to go with Mike
recall.
Bossy.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go with Mike Bossy.
Because we'll be talking about the Islanders later.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, a little foreshadowing there.
If they could go back and trade Mike Bossy, maybe they would. What with him being so good and all. Anyway.
And the funny helmet.
And the great hair.
Yeah.
Fantastic hair. Before we get into that, we've got a lot of numbers for you on the show today, don't we?
Ton of numbers.
Let's start with
And it all just started with a little casual conversation between you and I, because there seems to be a lot of suspensions already this season, and we're only, 13 games in?
Yes, and you and I are scientists, if nothing else.
Don't do that, man. I just finished listening to an interview with Richard Dawkins. I feel very insignificant after listening to him talk.
Shows you how much of a scientist I am. I don't know who Richard Dawkins is. I know who Richard Dawson is. Same guy?
No.
No Family Feud?
No.
Okay. Either way.
Do you know who Neil deGrasse is?
Did he write Degrassi High?
No. He's an astronomer. Astronomer?
That must be some sort of new profession I've never heard of before.
Okay. Anyways.
All right. Well, we're recording the show a little bit later in the day than usual, and it shows.
And it shows.
But we were talking about that, and we decided And
unlike other podcasts, we're only drinking water.
That is actually true. Well, I mean, you handed me this water, but I'm assuming it's just water.
It's just water.
We decided we were going to get numbers to back up our random observation. Sure. And as it turns out, we're right.
We're spot on. So let's look at this season. 13 games in. We have 8 regular suspensions already handed out.
We're not even I mean, some teams have only played like 9 games.
Right.
But yeah, I mean,
the most games played by any team so far is 13.
Okay, there you go.
Am I correct?
Yes. St. Louis has played 9. Those are the two ends of the spectrum.
So between 9 and 13 games, we have 8 regular season suspensions already dished out. That totals 53 games lost due to suspension.
Okay.
13 games in.
We did this backwards.
No, we didn't.
Well, we have no point of perspective.
Yes, we will, though.
Okay. All right.
So,
seems like a lot of suspensions already.
Okay. So, last year we had how many regular season games?
48.
22 regular suspensions.
Okay.
For 56 regular games.
There you go.
We've got 53 last year in a shortened season, or as everybody, those very intelligent people say, the truncated season.
Oh, that's more scientician talk over there.
There was 56 regular season games missed due to suspension.
Okay.
So I crunched a few numbers. At the pace we're at, we're looking at almost...
You look like you're still crunching the numbers.
So, yeah, almost 58 suspensions total by the end of the season.
Yeah, and I would make this claim as well. The suspensions that we are getting are longer.
Yeah, they're not 1 game, 2 game, 3 game. They're like 5, 10.
Because if you look at last season, I mean, we're just using last season. I mean, the year before you said there was 48 suspensions.
Right.
But last year, 56 games divided by 22 suspensions. So you're looking at less than 3 games on average per suspension. You're looking at like 2.5. But this year, 53 divided by 8. I mean, you're looking at almost 7 on average. And this doesn't take into account John Scott's suspension, which will be coming down and will be lengthy.
Right. And we did it before we started recording. Based on my predictions of like 58 total for the season, that's almost 300 games lost due to suspension.
Yeah. And I don't know.
A ton of games.
So what do we read into that? Do we make of it that the NHL is sick of having to suspend guys, so they're giving them longer suspensions, or are we just seeing worse hits and players aren't getting it?
But my thing I'm trying to get my head is what they're doing fixing anything? And you mentioned John Scott. Okay. Are we fixing anything with... It was already that's $800,000 in forfeited salaries.
Where does that go? It doesn't go to me.
No, it goes to the PA.
Okay, so
I
that's
mean,
not
it's
the
not
worst
a
thing.
bad thing. So it helps the players down the road. But I mean, who wants to lose that kind of money out of their paycheck?
Especially not a guy like John Scott. I mean, he's not one of the more prominently paid players. But here's my quick thing before we go off on John Scott. There's going to be hits where a guy gets a game or two or even three, and it's, some people are going to say that shouldn't be a suspension. Others are going to say it is. I don't mind those. I mean, they're not ideal.
I got to stop you there because
Okay.
the 1 or 2 game suspensions are usually goofball hits. You look at the hit and you go, "Oh, dude, why'd you do that?"
But it's going to happen. That's going to happen in
That
hockey.
kind of stuff's going to happen. But again, I go back to what is it fixing?
Well, I don't know that you can fix those because there's going to be stuff where you hit a guy high a little bit, but it's not full speed. There's just going to be stuff that there's going to be 2 game suspensions here or there. I don't know if that's completely avoidable, but the hits like the one from John Scott and some of these other ones we've seen already this year that are 5 or more games, these seem like they should be avoidable. The John Scott hit on Louis Eriksson, it's just terrible.
It's a horrible hit. It's what is the status of Eriksson?
Eriksson's dealing with a concussion.
He's dealing with concussion, yeah. So, I mean, after watching that hit, I mean, that's no shock. So,
but it goes back to what you and I said a couple weeks ago. I don't care if John Scott gets suspended for 20 games. That doesn't make the NHL's product worse. Now we lose Louis Eriksson, who was a good player.
That makes the product worse.
Yeah.
So, my point is if I'm John Scott, and John Scott in 6 years has
One goal.
One.
I wonder who he scored it on. I might have to look that up.
So, we know why he's out there.
Yeah, that's the problem to me. You shouldn't have a guy out there that's just. Although this gets deep. If you're going to talk about Buffalo and Boston, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, but let's not focus on 2 teams. Let's just focus on John Scott goes and he's going to hit that guy. And until this hit, his mindset is, I'm going to get 5 games. Oh, if I disguise the hit a little, because he's a giant, he's a huge man.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors. No matter what he does, if he hits somebody, he's probably hitting them in the head.
Okay, so a guy that's making league minimum, and he goes to hit a guy, and he knows he's going to get 10, 12 games. Does he make the hit?
No, and we might be leaning that way, and I wouldn't be shocked if Scott got more than 5 games.
So I guess what I'm saying is there's an automatic penalty for leaving the bench. 10 games.
Yeah.
You just leave. You don't have to touch anybody. You just have to leave the bench, and you get a 10-game suspension.
Guys aren't going to leave the bench. They just aren't.
And they don't. And they get a leg over to go, oh.
Or a teammate yanks them back. Supposedly, Nazem Kadri was going over the bench, and somebody grabbed him and was like, hey.
What are you doing? You're gonna be out for 10 games. We already got Clarkson out for 10. We don't need you out for 10. So if you know before you hit somebody that you're going to get X, you might think about it before you do it.
I mean, I would hope so. Again, if you're going to play hockey effectively and you are whether you're a skill guy or whatever, you can only think so much on the ice. You have to be playing by instinct. And that's where I don't want to pick necessarily on John Scott, but he put himself in the situation. You have a guy like that isn't necessarily a hockey player. So his instinct isn't, I'm going to take the puck and I'm going to set up a play and we're going to try and score, or I'm going to hit this guy to stop him from coming up the ice. Eriksson had passed the puck. He didn't even have the puck. And even if he did have the puck, it wasn't a legal hit.
Right.
So, what are you doing?
And maybe it's not so much a suspension as it is fines. Maybe the fines have to be increased.
Well, the suspension doesn't hurt Buffalo at all.
No.
Oh, darn, we don't have John Scott. We have to put somebody out there who might score more than one every 6 years.
Right.
But it does hurt John Scott if you're going to talk about a fine.
Yeah, because he's not a high-paid player. And if it's a hefty fine, I'm sure guys like him aren't going to do it. And here's the thing. Guys like him won't appear on rosters.
Well, yeah, he's kind of a fringe player.
Right. So
he's probably as fringe as you can get.
He's not going to be there.
I heard this question posed actually a couple different places this week. If he were, and Buffalo's not going to do this, but let's just say they released him. Let's just say they were done with John Scott.
Mm-hmm.
How many teams do you think line up to try and pick him up off waivers? Because I think it's like 2. I mean, you got a big guy like that.
I say 0. I say that he finds himself either in the A or lower.
So there's people out there that think it's like 25, and I just don't agree with that.
I disagree with that because he has no offensive output. He's there for size. Minor leagues, I see a role. Pro, NHL, I don't see a role. There's too many talented kids in the AHL waiting for a roster spot that can outperform him first-year, second-year players.
And you can find a big guy that can score more than, obviously he's scoring. What do you think of the whole backstory, though, of the only reason Buffalo has John Scott is because Milan Lucic ran Ryan Miller 2 years ago, back when Buffalo had nobody that was tough that could even stand up for their goalie?
I say that's all speculation,
Okay.
And it makes for a good story in somebody's blog or a newspaper or for fodder for sports talk radio. I don't put any weight behind that, because then that brings up the conversation that other commentators that I've watched are trying to start up is, should coaches be penalized?
Yeah, I've heard that. If a guy gets...
And now that's a huge Pandora's box, because how do you prove that?
You can't.
You can't.
There's going to be the occasional situation where it's like, okay, let's just use Buffalo for the example. Why does Ralston have John Scott out there at this particular moment? And honestly, that example that we're talking about where the hit occurred, you couldn't prove anything.
Nope.
You could almost make a better case back in the preseason game where they were against Toronto and there was the fight and he put him out there to fight somebody. Then you can at least say, okay, we put him out there. But there was no suspendable offense to John Scott in the preseason game. He was just fighting.
It was just a fight.
So you're going to find a coach who doesn't make nearly as much as the players every time one of your 22 players does something stupid.
Right. It's a very slippery slope, and that slope gets even higher who signed that player? It wasn't the coach that signed him. It was the front office.
Front office is going to have to pay the coaches more money so they can eat if they have to pay money every time one of their players gets in trouble.
So I think that's a big Pandora's box. I think that's the wrong direction. I think that the accountability falls on the shoulders of the player. I think if the league is going to try to eliminate the head contact and these so-called bad hits, is that you're going to have to make your penalties a little stiffer so that if a guy goes to step in, you back off, and people that have listened to this podcast know that I always bring it home. I always tell my players, if you see numbers or a guy in an awkward, let him go. Let him go, win the battle on the other side of the rink, because you don't, A, want the penalty, B, you don't want to hurt that player.
I actually think that this will, it can't go away completely because, again, it's hockey, it's ice, it's full speed. You guys getting paid a ton of money to produce. If you're not winning, you're not going to be in the league. So you're going to do whatever it takes to win. But I do think that this will get to a manageable level in the not too distant future because, A, I think these suspensions are going to help at some point. B, I think there are more and more skill guys coming up through the junior leagues and through the minor leagues that are ultimately, like you said, going to take these guys' jobs if they're sitting out. I mean, John Scott's going to sit for whatever it is. Let's just say it's 7 games. Somebody's going to be playing in his spot. And let's say that somebody puts up 2 or 3 goals, all of a sudden.
There, I got a question for you.
All right.
Do you want John Scott or Jonathan Drouin?
Well, that's not even close.
But that's what I'm saying. You got a talented kid that got sent down to the minors, and I would much rather have that kid on my roster than a John Scott.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Drouin is not the only – his name just popped in my head, but he is not the only talented young person in the minor leagues, and especially the AHL. There are so many talented young guys that if I'm a GM, I'm like, yeah, give me Jonathan Drouin.
Just where this game as a whole is going, the next generation is it just makes sense. They have all this training. They've seen these great players growing up. Just the way the game is evolving, that next generation is going to have more skill. So even if Buffalo has to go to their AHL affiliate and say, we need another 6'5" guy that can hit, it's going to be a guy with a little more skill.
Right.
And ultimately, I think it's going to be when these guys' peers pull somebody aside and just say, look, this is getting ridiculous. I mean, the Penguins had to do this with Matt Cook.
Right.
And for the most part, he's changed his game for the last 2 years. I mean, he's in Minnesota now, but if he doesn't change his game, he's off the roster.
But here's the positive thing about Matt Cook. He's still playing.
Because he changed his game.
He changed his game, but he's still playing. It's not that he didn't have the talent. He had a role. He was doing his role. Now the game has changed. He's had to change, and his talent's still shining through. I hate to say it, but John Scott's not a talented guy.
Well, I mean, Matt Cook was a guy that scored 10 goals
that. I mean, it's out, but let me retract that. He is a talented guy. He's playing in the NHL. I'm not.
True.
Okay? So he's got talent. But what I'm saying, his style of game is not what this game needs.
No, and maybe it's unfair. Maybe he was taught going through juniors or whatever that his role, because he was so big, was that he needs to focus on being a fighter and a hitter. I mean, he doesn't have a suspension for a bad hit.
But you know what? I don't even think the fighting roles is a role anymore.
No, but at least fighting, you're not necessarily injuring anybody.
Yeah, but that generation is like, I think I'm seeing fewer fights than we saw a bunch in the preseason. I don't know what happened there.
Everybody got it out of their system.
They got it out of their system. We're not seeing it now within 13 games into the season. I think you're right. I think that the younger generation, with the training off ice that they get, you're just seeing a different type of player.
The bar is just raised.
It's going to be a physical game. You can't avoid contact in this game. I coach mites and squirts. They're not allowed to touch each other, like hit each other, but they bump.
But I look at a guy like, even a guy like Alex Ovechkin hits. I thought it was one bump too many, but I was going to let it slide. A guy like Milan Lucic who can hit and score. A guy like Shane Doan who can hit and score. These are big guys.
Chara.
Yeah, there you go. So it's going to be.
You don't get much bigger than that, dude.
No, they don't. Thankfully, it's a little frightening.
You're listening to The Hockey Podcast. Feel free to email comments or questions to the show at our email address, thehockeypodcast@gmail.com.
All right, segment 2, and Doug, I dare say this segment right here is why we do this podcast.
Why is that?
Because when you see something so egregious happen in the world of hockey,
you have to talk about it.
I need to be able to vent about it. And while I have vented to many people about this already, many of which work in the world of hockey and some of which don't follow hockey and wonder what my problem is, I want to vent now into this microphone that is attached to my head.
Well, I got to tell you, before you tell the THP listeners what you're going to vent about, when I was told about this event, I had Marty Feldman eyes.
Wow.
I just like, really?
I don't know who Marty Feldman is.
Oh, come on.
I'm sorry. I don't know. Is he another scientist?
He was Igor in Young Frankenstein?
Igor Larionov?
That's Frankenstein. What's that?
I only know Igor Larionov.
No, Igor in Young Frankenstein.
Oh, okay.
The guy with the big buggy eyes?
I haven't seen Young Frankenstein.
Oh,
This is your second Young Frankenstein reference in a week. Now, I admit that is a fault on my part.
It's a classic,
Yeah,
dude. You got to watch it.
Sorry,
You got Netflix, watch it.
I don't have Netflix, and you know it. You're just rubbing it in my face. On to the trade.
All right, on to the trade. Big trade.
So we knew coming into the season the Buffalo Sabres probably aren't going to be winning this year, and they're probably not going to be playing for this year, and their two best players are both unrestricted free agents at the end of this season. One is Thomas Vanek, one is Ryan Miller. They both make a lot of money, and if you're Buffalo, if you're smart, if you can get something good, you're going to trade them both probably, unless they just get off to a tremendous start, which they haven't. They have 2 wins.
Right. They were 0 for a long time before they got those 2 wins. And at the before the beginning of the season, we had them finishing 7th in the Atlantic. Both of us.
Who do we have 8th?
Florida.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that makes
Fair
sense.
enough. Yes, okay. Yeah, we're going to have to burn that notebook over there because I was thinking about one of my predictions in the Pacific that I don't want to bring back up. But
well, I'm sure it'll come around.
Anyway, I knew it was bad when I was making it.
And I have it all recorded right here.
No, I'll get rid of that. Don't you worry. I'll just alter it. So the Buffalo Sabres do find not a taker for Thomas Vanek. A lot of teams wanted Thomas Vanek. I mean, the guy was a 40-goal scorer a couple years back. They find the New York Islanders. So I hear about this trade, and you had Marty
Feldman
eyes. Okay, there you go. When I heard about it, I just heard what the Islanders had given to Buffalo. So the trade is Thomas Vanek goes to the Islanders. The Islanders give up Matt Moulson and a first-round pick next year and a second-round pick in 2015. So my reaction was, okay, so the Islanders got Ryan Miller. That's who I thought they got from Buffalo. Which, even for Ryan Miller, that might be overpaying. But if you're the Islanders, you have John Tavares. You've got a lot of other...
Well, and you're thinking you still have Moulson.
Well, I figured they traded Moulson. I mean, because I knew they traded Moulson, but you still have Kyle Oposo. You still have a lot of guys that are fast, that can score. You don't have to lean on Evgeny Nabokov as your number one goalie. So you're making a move. Once you're trading Matt Moulson, to me, you're making a move to try and maybe even win the Stanley Cup this year, at least go deep. So you're obviously addressing goaltending. No, they're getting a guy back that's basically Matt Moulson.
Right.
A little bit better.
Little bit better. Yes, he's a 30-goal scorer minimum.
He's a much better goal scorer.
He's
than Matt
a
Moulson.
I read an article. He was referred to as a sniper.
Well, that's pretty bold. Was that written by him?
No.
Okay.
But I agree. You're really not going way out there. And the caveat to all of this, and you brought it to my attention, is he's unrestricted.
Yeah. Okay, look. So for the next however long we talk about this, we're not ripping Thomas Vanek. He's a great player.
He's an awesome player.
The first, month and a half of last season, he would have been the Hart Trophy winner.
Sure.
He's a goal scorer, and he's been doing it on Buffalo where he doesn't have a lot of help.
Right.
So, yes, if somebody came up to me and they said, you can have Thomas Vanek, who's 29 years old, or you can have Matt Molson, who's also 29 years old, which one do you want? I want Thomas Vanek.
Right.
However, I don't want him enough to trade Matt Molson, who has great chemistry with John Tavares. And it's not fantasy, plug in and play hockey. We don't know if Vanek and Tavares will be good together.
And he proved it in the playoffs last year.
Well, and beyond that, I want my first-round pick next year, and I want my second-round pick in 2 years.
Right, because what is the glaring thing? If you're Garth Snow and you're going to make a trade for your team, what is the glaring thing that needs to be fixed?
You need defense,
One.
which he said, not this past draft, but the 2012 draft, he wanted to trade up. He wanted to get Murray. Columbus wasn't going to make that trade. So Garth Snow and the Islanders' response was to use 7 draft picks on 7 defensemen. That's all they drafted in 2012. So maybe they have good defense coming up in the system, but you don't have a goalie yet. So even if you don't feel like you need that first-round pick next year, you can trade that first-round pick to get a goalie.
You made the playoffs last year, so you know you can get there. A goalie in hockey is like an ace pitcher in baseball. He's the guy. He's the guy you need. And if you can get some kind of goaltending, you're going to go deep.
You know me. I think the Penguins are far superior to the Islanders. I watched that series last year. If the Islanders, they would have needed to have a very good goalie to shut down the Penguins the way Pittsburgh was scoring at that point, but Boston had Tuukka Rask, and look what happened there.
Mm-hmm.
The Islanders were scoring on the Penguins pretty much at will, but they couldn't stop Pittsburgh. And I know that's an extreme example because Fleury was hiding in the back of the net, and the Penguins have a lot of offense, but still, you're going to play teams like that in the playoffs.
Well, I said it just before we started recording this segment. You get the Tampa Bay situation. You got goal scoring. You know you can score goals. But if you can't stop the other team with defense and goaltending, it doesn't matter how many goals you score. You're going to try, okay, I score 5, I got to score 6 now. I score 4, I got to score 5. Is that the way you want to play your season? I don't think so. I think you want to be able to get a 2-0 lead and be able to hold that 2-0 lead.
You have to in the playoffs. And so, again, if you're going to make this trade, now Matt Molson's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year, too. He is due $3.13 million this year. Thomas Vanek is due $7.14 million.
It's a hefty price tag, man.
They're probably both going to want to raise.
And let's just stop the press this way. Now, you talked about John Scott hitting waivers, and you said somebody had said 25 teams wanted him. I'm like, sorry. Thomas Vanek's an unrestricted free agent. How many teams do you think want him?
A lot.
A lot.
Let's see, 30?
Yeah.
I would say 30 teams want him.
Yeah, every team in the league would want a 30-goal scorer.
He's an excellent player.
And he's 29.
And he has proven it throughout his whole career. Now, Molson was kind of a journeyman for a while, played for L.A. for just a little bit. Wasn't a point producer until he got teamed up with John Tavares. But so what? If you're the Islanders, you have John Tavares. So, here's Matt Molson's numbers throughout his career. Again, he's 29 years old, drafted in 2003. He was a 9th-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
So not a great pedigree coming in. Played a couple years with L.A., had 6 goals. He gets to the Islanders in the 2009-10 season, and from there he has 30 goals, 31 goals, 36 goals, and then 15 last year in the shortened season, but still 44 points.
44 points in 47 games.
So I just looked at their last 3 years and then this year. So if you combine those numbers, Thomas Vanek, 184 points in his last 209 games. That's about .88 points per game. Matt Molson, 177 points in 223 games, so .79 points per game. So, yeah, Vanek's a little bit better, but it's not enough to do anything for you. And now you have to re-sign him because you gave away 2 pretty high picks. I don't know.
Well, you better open up the wallet because I'm telling you, the 29 other teams are going to take a run for him.
I would assume that the Islanders must feel like they have him signed.
How do you not take a run for him?
You have
Could you imagine him on the third line on San Jose?
Nobody's
going to stop them.
Giving Garth Snow and the Islanders the benefit of the doubt here, I'm assuming the reason they had to give up so much is because other teams wanted Thomas Vanek in a trade.
Sure.
So now we assume Ryan Miller is next. Buffalo's already gotten rid of one. They're going to trade Ryan Miller now. At some point before the trade deadline. Why hold on to him? He's an unrestricted free agent too.
Yeah, you can be freeing up some cap space to make some moves in the offseason, I guess.
I mean, from Buffalo's perspective, I like this more. Molson is a little bit riskier because, again, they don't have John Tavares, so he's not playing with him there.
Scored 2 goals in his first game with Sabres.
That's true. Playing on the line with Cody Hodgson, and I'm not even sure who else is on that line tonight.
I do know. I checked it, but I've gone blank.
That's a good sign.
Starts with a P.
Yeah. Okay, well, there you go.
Ka.
No, that doesn't start with a P.
Come on.
Let's be clear here. We're not saying that the Islanders were going to use that number 1 pick next year to take a great goalie in the first round, because you draft a goalie and he's 3 or 4 years away from making an impact at best.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think if somebody told me the Islanders and Sabres are going to make a trade, I'm thinking the Islanders are going out there and getting Ryan Miller. Because that
makes
need.
more sense in my head. And if you're going to spend that kind of money.
And if you're Buffalo, you picked up 2 draft picks, and you've got a guy that's going to be less expensive than Vanek to sign.
And to be really honest with you, as good as Ryan Miller is, I think Ryan Miller needs a change of scenery.
Yeah. I think if Ryan Miller were here, A, that would be weird, and B, he would say the same thing.
Right.
If he was just randomly showing up. Also worth noting, the Islanders are still paying Rick DiPietro and Alexei Yashin. You're tuned into the Hockey Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Hockey Podcast for even more hockey news.
# do it.
News and notes. That means it is time for your weekly Nail Yakupov update.
And
He scored.
oh,
Look at that.
look at that.
On to Philadelphia.
But did he celebrate?
He did not celebrate. You watched the footage.
I watched the footage. He did not celebrate. He hugged his teammates and gave a fist bump.
He probably should not celebrate until he gets over at least like the 3-goal barrier.
Well, he's got 3 points now.
Yeah, picked up a couple assists in the past week too, so he's a good player. I mean, he's going to come around. I'm the guy that keeps getting sucked into the Oilers are going to be good at some point.
Right.
They have 8 points in 13 games right now, which is last in the Western Conference, and worse for them, they're in the Pacific Division, which
Yeah, they disappoint me. I thought they would, with all that young talent, they would do a little bit better.
still plenty of time to do that, but I had these numbers, and you should just be so happy I didn't even bring them for the podcast that we're recording. But I did the numbers. I ran these numbers myself earlier in the week, and I averaged out the points per team per division. So I was like, what does your typical Atlantic Division team have? What does your typical Metro? The Metro was clearly the worst. Again, we're early, and
Right.
it's going to change. Metro was the worst, Atlantic, then Central, and then Pacific. So if you're Edmonton, A, you're bringing down the Pacific's average, and B, you got a pretty
And we had them
pretty
finishing
steep road.
5th.
Yeah. They're already 13 points behind San Jose.
Wow.
That's rough. But, Yakupov, if he gets going, and it sounds like they might get Sam Gagner back within a week
Right.
from that broken jaw he suffered in the preseason, which looked horrible.
Horrible. But you know what? I think they're in a lot better position than the Flyers.
Well, in theory, yeah. I mean, I guess the Flyers are not that far behind all the other teams in their division except Pittsburgh. Philadelphia has won 2 in a row.
2 in a row.
2 straight.
And in the last 10, they're 3-7.
Well,
And they've only
you know.
played 10 games.
Those are details. Claude Giroux.
Hey, they're above New York.
Claude Giroux goal watch. 0.
That's unbelievable.
It's there's a goalie in the league with more goals than Claude Giroux.
Paul Bissonnette has more goals than Claude Giroux.
No goals for Paul Bissonnette. Not yet.
Points.
Same amount though.
Points.
And I tell you what, Neil Yakupov has more goals than Claude Giroux.
Yes, he does.
Former best player in the world, Claude Giroux.
Who said that?
Peter Laviolette.
Oh.
During a playoff series. We won't ever talk
Against
about that
who?
again. Oh, against Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
Not like there was
That's
the
why
other,
it's entrenched in your brain.
not like the best other great candidates for best player in the world might have been like 10 feet away. Quick injuries to pass on to you. Pittsburgh loses Rob Scuderi to a broken ankle. That hurts.
That hurts.
He's one of their few shutdown defensemen.
That was his quote after the game. He goes, "It hurts."
That hurts. James Neal. Did he
What's up with
retire?
him?
Where is he?
I don't know.
I mean,
We're going to have the James Neal watch going now.
the report on him, and I've been looking every day, trust me,
Why is that?
because I may or may not have wasted my second-round pick on Mr. James Neal in a particular hockey pool that I might be in. He's a week away. He's at least a week away from skating. At least.
A week.
But it's been a week for each of the last 4 weeks.
He hasn't even skated.
No.
Lower body.
Upper. And even that just came out of like a week ago.
Upper body and he can't skate. Is it his noggin?
I don't know. No, I don't know. I would think the Penguins, who are so forthright if a guy has a concussion, because they seem to have to deal with one every 2 days.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. I know he has as many goals as Claude Giroux. Carolina Hurricanes. Oh, best player in the world, Claude Giroux. Cam Ward out 3 to 4
Cam's
weeks.
out.
Yeah. So there you go.
That hurts.
This is what happened to them last year.
You know what? And Stahl's not doing well.
No.
They're struggling. Didn't they play tonight?
They did. They lost. But their start hasn't been terrible. Even with the loss, they're 4-5-3. So they're right there in the thick of things. I mean, at the moment, they're tied for second in the Metro.
It's not bad.
But you're going to need your goalie. I mean.
Well, it goes back to a segment earlier than this, is that, half that segment was us talking about goaltending. We joke about Philadelphia getting a really poor start and Claude Giroux not scoring any goals, but their goaltending is they've only allowed 27 goals.
Yeah, 27 goals over 10 games. And, I mean, there was a couple bad games in there. Steve Mason is definitely surprising me. And this is a guy that won the Rookie of the Year a couple years back and then has just fallen off the face of the earth until this year.
Well, especially after the deal that Ray Emery signed. I thought Ray was going to come in and just, set the world on fire because he didn't take a lot of money for that position as the starting goaltender.
Yeah.
And Mason seems to be, right there on par with him, if not a little bit better.
So if Mason's going to play well and you have Ray Emery, who's already proven himself to be a very quality backup. You would think you'd be winning games. Again, it's early. Philadelphia could easily turn things around, but they will need goals.
You're digging yourself a big hole. You're 10 points behind Pittsburgh right now.
Yeah, and even in the East, I mean, you look at that Metro division, it's just amazing to me. Like, if you just go with teams that have less than double-digit points in the standings.
Right.
The Atlantic has 2. The Central doesn't have any. The Pacific only has Edmonton. And then the Metro has 3 teams. New Jersey, Philadelphia, and the Rangers. And I think everybody expected New Jersey, but Philadelphia and the Rangers, what is going on?
Yeah, nobody expected that. Come on. I mean, you gave them the big excuse of the shortened season last year. You don't have that excuse this year.
Yeah, I don't want
and both those rosters are just loaded.
I don't want to be the guy that has to make excuses for Philadelphia, but I really thought that they'd be fine this year.
Yeah, I thought they'd be doing really well, especially with the Ray Emery and the Mason. So the Ray Emery and the Mason are proving their worth. It's the rest of the team that's not.
But maybe they start slow. I mean, this is the difference between this year and last year. They have 72 more games to get back on track.
You just can't look at it that way. You've got to go.
You can if you're Craig Berube.
Who?
Yeah. One other team that's surprising people, Colorado Avalanche.
Well, look, before we go to Colorado.
Why don't we do the podcast on location each week from a different NHL city?
Oh, yeah, that'd be nice. Who's paying for that?
Well, I figured you.
I got 3 boys playing travel hockey.
Say we'll just go with them.
I just bought 4 airline tickets.
So buy 5.
For 4 different cities.
Well, buy 6. Get yourself one, too, so you're not doing it on remote.
Well, let's see. One kid's going to Dallas next week. We could do a show from Dallas.
Dallas is off to an intriguing start.
And then a couple of weeks later, the other one's going to Colorado.
See, that's where we need to be right now.
And then Utah. And then Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago's got a good hockey team.
Chicago's a good city.
There you go.
But anyways, Avalanche, 10-1. Holy smokes.
It's ridiculous at this point. Now, you and I both said, and then you're going to pull out the prediction, we both had them sixth in that division. And that in theory.
We both said, too, though, that, it was a team loaded with young talent.
I said word for word on this podcast that if my 2 favorite teams were not on TV, anytime the Avalanche were on, I'd be watching them.
Yes, you did say that.
They're going to be the most entertaining team. What I did not necessarily, and you brought up the point very astutely, that Semyon Varlamov has essentially 3 goaltending coaches with him. If it's ever going to work for him, this is when it's going to work.
Right.
And it has.
And it's working.
Colorado has scored 35 goals in their 10 or 11 games, which is, that's good. That's very nice.
It's very good.
They've given up 16.
That's awesome.
That is unreal.
That means your defense is clicking. Your goaltender's clicking. That also means, this is just me, the team is playing well in front of him.
Well, they're just excited. They are what Edmonton should be. You have all the young talent, and it's coming together, and it's funny. Everybody has just constantly talked about Edmonton, and here's the year Edmonton's got another top pick. Well, the year the Islanders took John Tavares, Colorado took Matt Duchene, and he's not too bad. And
he's not too bad.
In fact, he's getting better because he's that guy who had the one bad year that kind of woke him up, and now he's on this ridiculous diet and ridiculous workout regimen, and it's working. He's been a beast, but if you're not going to give up any goals, you don't even need that much scoring.
Right, and it goes back again to the other segment. It's like you can score all the goals you want, but if you can't stop them. I mean, this sounds oversimplified, but it's not.
Yeah. Well, they're allowing 1.45 goals per game, which is by far the best in the NHL.
It's amazing.
And
it's really amazing.
Now we're to the point where you asked me off the air, like, is this for real? Are they gonna, are they gonna play at this pace all year? No, but they're in a good spot already to make the playoffs. I know there's still a ton of games
Which
left.
goes back to what you said about Philadelphia. Oh, you got 70 games, you got lots of time, but who's in the better position, 10-1 or 3-7?
Well, yeah.
Clearly Avalanche, right? If they lose a couple of games, you're not really falling anywhere. And yeah, you're going to need a breather. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're going to lose a few games along the way, but it's just the fourth line giving you a blow, and then you're going to go back at it.
And the question with a team like Colorado, who's got a lot of young talent and a new coach behind the bench, and Joe Sakic in a new position as well, is not can they stay good once they get there. It's can they get good. When are they even going to have a run like this? They started the year on a 6-game winning streak. They lost to Detroit. And they're on a 4-game winning streak as we're recording this. That was their response to one loss.
Yeah, but I only see them getting better.
Well, yeah, and they're not going to win at a 10-1 pace all year.
No.
But they don't have to. If they're winning 5 out of 10 even and taking a couple of those losses to overtime, they're going to be in a good spot to make the playoffs. I just don't think you get to 10-1 on accident. And just to further that point, they've already beat Anaheim, Toronto, Boston, Washington, Pittsburgh, and they've held all those teams to 1 or 0 goals.
Okay, and let's compare them to another 10-1 team in San Jose.
I mean, I still would take San Jose in a 7-game series.
But I mean, the where I was going with it is, even though that San Jose has the veterans, they're not going to stay at that pace. They're just not. You can't.
Well, yeah, nobody can.
So Colorado's sitting in a really good spot with a lot of young players.
Well, and the thought with San Jose is they better do this good, and they better make the playoffs, and they better go 3 rounds deep. The thought with Colorado is, hey, if we make the playoffs this year, that's exceeding expectations.
Well, let's look at the numbers. Goals for, you've already said, Colorado 35, goals against 16. San Jose's right there, 48 for and 20 against.
Yeah, San Jose doesn't even give up shots.
You've got both ends working. You've got scorers scoring. You've got goaltenders and defense keeping the puck out of the net.
Colorado hasn't given up more than 2 goals in the game, except in their 4-2 loss to Detroit. Most of their games, and again, I just rattled off the offenses to you. Anaheim, Toronto, Boston's offense is sketchy, but they're a good team. Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah.
Shut Pittsburgh out in Pittsburgh.
Avalanche fans are very happy right now.
They should be. All right, last point you wanted to make. I don't even know what this is.
It's Halloween.
I understand. It's Halloween.
What are you doing for Halloween?
I'll be at a hockey game.
Oh.
So will you.
Yeah. Why does professional sports do that?
I tell you what, this is why they do it. This is October 28th. There's a ton of hockey on tonight. There's Monday Night Football, and there's the World Series. There's so many sports on right now.
But you got to do a game on Halloween?
I would rather do a game on Halloween. Am I going to go trick or treat?
Yeah, well, yeah, but there's Halloween parties, man. You get to dress up.
Those are on the weekend.
So if you're going to do it, what would you do? What costume would you wear for Halloween this year?
Oh, start with yours, because I didn't know this was coming.
Well, that's no good.
All right,
I asked you a question.
Well, I understand that, but I threw it back on you like a politician. I had this thought. My girlfriend is blonde, right?
Okay.
We've gone as Tommy Lee and Pamela Anderson before.
Well, that's cool.
But my thought was, how about this is a football reference, but how about I go as Rex Ryan and you go as Rob Ryan, who looks just like Rex Ryan except with blonde hair? She wasn't a big fan of that because Rob Ryan probably weighs 250 pounds and she weighs 90.
See, I'd probably go as Jason so I could wear the goalie mask.
Jason Statham?
No.
Oh, Jason from
Friday.
Hey, that brings up a very important question. If they filmed that movie again today, would he have an updated goalie mask? Or would he just
he can't. It's got to be the Jacques Plante mask.
Okay. So he wouldn't have John Van Beesbrook's old mask with the panther on it?
My wife and I went, she dressed up as a brick.
Okay.
And I dressed up like a construction guy with the overalls, right?
And this was for Halloween or just a Tuesday?
No, it was for Halloween.
Okay.
What do you think the punchline is?
I don't think it can be said on this podcast.
Sure it can.
You can say it. I know what it is.
She was the brick. I was the bricklayer.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Oh, that's, there's a lot of thought into that. And I bet you had the enjoyment of people asking you all night.
All night long. It was awesome. I got to deliver the punch time 30 times.
Yeah, see, I don't want to introduce my girlfriend as Rob Ryan, so maybe I'll come up with a new idea. That's it for episode 22. Join us next week as we wrap up the first month of the regular season.
And we'll also keep an eye on Colorado and San Jose to see if they can keep their torrential winning ways.
Wow. Plus whatever else happens in the next 7 days. Thanks for listening to the Hockey Podcast.